So hi, and welcome to Candid Low Code. Candid Low Code is a vidcast series we're doing here at Mendix to directly address the things our customers and employees are asking for most right now. I'm John Scalamero, a manager of architecture and governance within product marketing here at Mendix. And today I'm joined by David Kuhn, the director of solutions marketing at Mendix. And we're going to talk about a really interesting topic around generation-based project planning. So hi, David. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you on. How are things going out there in Pennsylvania?
Hey, John. Things are going really well. It finally stopped snowing, so I think it might get a little warmer.
That's definitely a step in the right direction. So one of the interesting things that we have here is that you and I share a lot in common. In that we've both dealt with remote teams. We've both dealt with this working from home. We've also both dealt with building low code programs. And I was really interested because when I talked to you about getting you on the show, you had mentioned something called generational project planning or generational strategy. And can you kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, so in my previous experience with Department of Defense and then with insurance, there's always this gap between your strategy, your target architecture, and how you're going to execute towards that. So when you look at multi-gen planning, you're really looking at the generations it's going to take for you to get to the point of arrival, which is really the outcome of your strategy. And so your target architecture falls in line with whatever your strategy is. How are you going to go create that outcome? And so it's a planning exercise that a lot of people say is attributed to NASA. I don't know if I necessarily believe it, but it helps people think about what are we really intending on getting out of this? And it really puts it in the terms the business and IT can understand. And I think it really helps the teams come together on what the overall program plan should be and what projects should break off of that, which enables agile teams to just go execute because now they understand high level what the real requirements are
And where they're going. So give me an example, like a real just simple example of what a multi-gen plan would look like and how that would break down.
So I've got an example of one that NASA was hoping for. You know, their goal is really put a man on the moon, and the key to that, return to Earth. So how do you do that? You know, the point of arrival is when we can orbit, land, walk on the moon, and return. Some of the technical capabilities that we have to make that happen are we need a lunar lander. We need navigation, not only to get us there, but also get us back. And you need a booster to get back off of the orbit that you're stuck in. And so some of the things that need to happen, you need to be able to recover the capsule, re-enter the atmosphere, life support, communications. Part of what you do in multi-gen planning is you look at what is the point of arrival? Where does the business need to be and what's the outcome we're getting? And typically you would do this in terms of business capabilities and capability maturity. You know, in Gen 1, we just need to launch a man into space. Okay, what technical capabilities are needed to make that happen? Well, we have to be able to recover the capsule. We have to have life support. We have to have aircraft communications. We need boosters. When you get into the next generation, 2 men get into the Earth orbit. So now you're talking about being able to orbit, being able to stay in space for a long period of time. You have to figure out how do we re-enter the atmosphere. There's a lot that goes into that. But at this point, the dependency on that is prove that we can recover a capsule. There's technology and business dependencies that kind of go in here. One of the things that I found useful, this is the model that you'll typically have is these 3 type things, right? What is the business capability you're maturing at each of that space? And then, or where is the maturity at that? What is the technical capabilities that you're utilizing to mature to that point? And then what dependencies are critical to make it so that happens? By listing out dependencies, you can also list things that might not be known at this point. And so if you list things that aren't known, you can go and put, what are the key questions that we need to answer before we get into Gen 2, right? And I think that's part of the challenge where in IT, we like to go fast, especially with low code, but there are certain things that have happened outside of the control of the system we're working on where we need answers. Is it okay from a business side to do this thing? How would I make push notifications happen? And determine where there's real gaps. So I added this lower part that talks about technical debt because part of the challenge is to get to this point of arrival, you're going to build things that are going to go away. There's a value add, but then quickly they become not valuable anymore. You need to understand that there's additions and reductions to technical debt as you go. So that everyone knows we're building this thing. don't over-engineer it. It's only being built for this one piece. It's going to guide us into the next step. And so that's how we typically templated this stuff out, to be able to walk people through what generations are there. And we would only really share with the business these top parts, right? Because that's the part that truly matters there. Down at the bottom, that was more shared with the architecture team, the development team, the IT leadership, to be able to get them to understand, are you willing to take on the risk of, we only make it to Gen 2, how do you get rid of that technical debt?
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple of questions here before we wrap up. So the first big question I have is, can you give us an example that's more business related? I mean, putting somebody on the moon, that's great, but could you give us like a Gen 1, 2, and then point of arrival, or maybe point of arrival and then backwards, of like an actual business problem or an actual business strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about MVPs, right?
Mm-hmm.
On any project, we have this thing that is supposed to be a minimal viable product. Every single time I have seen people take a minimal viable product and turn it into this big monolith. The part that really helps is ideating around what is more than the minimal viable product. What if this minimal viable product works? Because everyone wants their piece to be put in. And so if you think about that, your minimum viable product should be generation 1. But what happens when that's successful? What does that turn into? What does this really guide us towards in your target architecture or your strategy to help execute that? And I think it shows people what innovation can do to help build into your point of arrival and your strategy. But it also helps limit, okay, guys, that's out of the scope of this business capability maturity level we're at Gen 1.
So the Gen 1, 2, and point of arrival sort of thought process, there's no so the moon landing, that was years, right? But it doesn't have to take years. One of the things that Gartner was saying is that we really need to reduce our strategy time due to the current situation. Could this function in smaller strategies and smaller planning?
Yeah, 100%. So most businesses that I know set up things called programs, and programs are broken up into projects. At the very highest level, you could just use this for program planning. This is the program to sunset the core system that you have. That's going to take a long time to get through, but we need to be able to show value. And so there might be really big things in each of these generations. There's nothing that says we can't take this from a 2-hour conversation into, okay, now each team that's responsible for that generation, go down and break that into, how are you going to make this work? Here's the first critical things. Now we're going to have some of the strategy planning team work on what does that look like in the future. You can build out some of these other cases knowing what is the input and the output of each generation. You can get work happening immediately and break it down into the teams on the ground actually elevating up what's really happening on those things.
So let me ask one last question before we wrap up here. And it's really, have you seen this with remote work being viable? And how have you used this with upper management in order to communicate to them strategy or to collaborate with them strategy?
Yeah, I think remote work is awesome. I've loved it forever. The hard part is it's really great when you have a plan and you're executing to that plan. Where you get into challenges are when, right now, you can't have a big strategy session where you go in and whiteboard. It's really difficult to get people to do that. And being a reformed architect, it's very hard for me to not whiteboard. So you need another way to communicate to people, right? And I think you're in the same boat. You got to draw pictures. And I think, by taking this and enabling this, we were able to have conversations around the world. So when I was with the Department of Defense, we had 14 different development teams all over the world at 12 different companies. And so by putting it in this light, you could say, okay, these tracks of work need to be done by this team. These tracks of work need to be done by this team. Now go figure out how to execute that. And so it kind of took us to get into high-level alignment, but not dictate how every person does their job. And so what it can do is enable you to all get on the same page, so we're driving towards the same goal, but break the work down so that each team can operate in their own fashion. And I think there's some architectural nuances there to make it so that each team can build with whatever and however they want to build, but that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you, David, so much for your time today. I really enjoyed having you on. It's always good to talk to you, and I look forward to talking to you more in the future. For those watching, please let us know what topics that you'd like us to cover on the next episodes in the comments below. And goodbye until next time. Take care, David.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like more Candid Low Code content, please go to video.mendix.com or our YouTube channel. If you have ideas for new Candid Low Code videos, please let us know in the comments below.